What drives you to keep risking extreme conditions and returning to wildlife hotspots after so many decades in the field?
What drives me to do it? There's a couple things. One's based in reality, the one's based in passion. The reality is I got to make a living somehow. And we've all been contractors at NatGeo. Um, so you actually worked from story to story. And all except one of my stories have been my ideas. So something I wanted to do, and that's the passion where you come up with an idea by working with a scientist or you hear about something, and then you dig a little bit deeper and go, hey, you know what? I should do that. And since I've been working with big cats for many years, it's a small community and there's only so many big cats. So you kind of gravitate towards something you hear and you decide that you want to do that next.
Hmm. And what's the kind of most difficult recent maybe assignment that you've had, both kind of physically and emotionally, and how did you overcome it?
Well, there's so many different types of obstacle. This last story, we had some bureaucratic issues to deal with, many, many. And so that's a different kind of obstacle that in many instances I have learned to deal with and to not let it overly upset you when you have a bureaucratic problem in front of you with a government maybe not helping as much as they could to get you the permissions that you need and to get you in the field. So, but many of the other ones, uh, the story before that, this last one I was on Asiatic lion, the only lions outside of Africa, which are in Gujarat, India. And before that, it was U.S. tigers, revolved around Joe Exotic and Tiger King and Doc Antle. That's a completely different kind of. This is crazy people who are doing illegal things that morally wrong. So you have different ways that you have to go about your story to get permissions from these guys to come meet them, and be on their property. And how much are they going to show you what they do, you know? Because a lot of the stories that I work on myself and with my partner of 36 years sharing Gyna, we're finally getting married after 36 years of
Brilliant.
September.
Great to
Yeah.
hear.
And so, we've had many, a lot of the stories we want to do are things that end up having made a difference, whether it's the Tiger Temple in Thailand and that being closed by the government because of the information we were able to gather. And the four stories Sharon wrote online from NatGeo and the video that I did. And the U.S. Tiger story helped pass the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and that President Biden signed in 2022. So those kind of things are important. That you don't know that something like that's going to happen when you start it, but it's great when it does.
Hmm. And how do you navigate the stories where you don't necessarily agree with what they're doing, like maybe the Tiger King and stuff? How do you kind of pitch it to them where they don't get defensive and actually let you have access and photograph?
Well, I never told them anything that I wouldn't have told someone else, you know? I wasn't like bullshitting or buttering things to make them seem better. I just said, "Hey, I'd love to come to see your tiger show, your big cat show. I'd love to come see what you guys do. Hey, I heard about you." Tiger King hadn't come out when we did our 30-page story for NatGeo. So, see, that was different. We were first, and then when the story came out, 4 months later, Tiger King came on Netflix, which helped because, and we didn't know what it was gonna do at the time, whether it was gonna be a hindrance. Everybody thinks these guys are cool. Everybody wants to go at a tiger cub or feed it a bottle. And the bottom line is, everybody wants to hold a tiger cub. I don't care who you are. Yeah. I mean, and so you ask, a lot of these people knew me already. Like Doc Antle knew me. Uh, I had spoken to him about a decade earlier about a pharmaceutical ad that came through NatGeo image collect. And he knew who I was and told me, "Hey, I love your photography, love what you do." And so they already knew. If when we got there and we had days of working with the people, whether it was Doc or Joe Exotic or the guy that came after him. Luckily, I've forgotten some of these names. Kind of a cleansing process,
Yeah.
which you need after doing that. Um, but yeah, we went in and just photographed what they let us photograph or what they were doing, and then in the end, it made a huge difference. And then, at the same time, you have to organize your story where you're looking at these tiger shows and cub petting because that's the whole bit. You always have to have cubs to pet, but they can't be more than 3 to 4 months old because then they're too big to pet. And if that's the case, if you think about it, well, how are you going to always have cubs that are only 3 or 4 months old or younger than that to pet? You're going to have this constant speed breeding, which we first had learned about at the Tiger Show. That they had 178 tigers. So, and they were definitely involved in speed breeding because no matter when you went there, 365 days a year, they had cubs to pet. And so when we came in, and decided we were going to do the story about tigers in the U.S. or captive tigers in the U.S., um, which is the only kind of tigers there are, um, that that we were going to be doing that, and they were involved in the same breeding process to always have cubs. And a lot of people don't think about it. I didn't think about it in the beginning. But you take the cubs away from their mother as soon as they're born, so they don't have a bond with mom, and then they can start breeding again rather quickly.
Mm. And I can't really remember the Tiger King that much, but was all of this like, was some of this legal? Some of the, like, the speed breeding and having that many tigers, was it legal or was it very, very shady and illegal?
It
Because why
was
would they let you
very
photograph?
shady, and I'm not sure what parts were illegal, but primarily it was illegal because they were moving cubs across state lines. The bottom line, there was no federal ban many of these breeding practices, but there is now. And that was once we learned about it, actually, it was easier to obtain a tiger in many states than it is to adopt a dog or a cat. Because you got to go through all kinds of things. You got to go to your vet. You got to be sure that you're going to be have a good home for these animals. They have to be spayed beforehand. Now you can just go buy a tiger, not anymore, but you could. And once you find out these things, it's pretty incredible. And then it kind of you start working with people and find out that there are some of the folk against this that have been working on Capitol Hill to try to get a law passed for many, many years. And so what we did just kind of helped that come to be. At least we were told by lawyers on the Hill that worked for many conservation organizations that we moved the needle because they said it was a unanimous decision. There was a great reason why it was a unanimous decision by a friend of ours, Tim Harrison, who used to be a police officer and a firefighter. So it was called the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and that's how you can get it passed. Because yeah, there. It's dangerous for people to own big cats, especially with the changing storms that we're having everywhere. That a lot of these roadside zoos fences could fall down. These cats could get out, and who has to deal with them? Then firefighters and police officers. They don't have training to deal with a tiger or a lion that gets away from one of these places. So, that's how that act came about. So, yeah, there were things that just had no law, and then the aspects of what they were doing, speed breeding, moving cubs across state line, selling the animals when they got too big to pet, which was a big issue because a lot of people go, well, what happened to them when they were too big to pet? And the only answer we have is we have no idea. Because no matter how deep we tried to dig, you just don't know what happened to them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
They
And
just kind of did disappear in many instances.
do you think they're going to foreign countries or they're getting killed or they're getting released into the wild or a combination of
No, 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 no. You could never release any captive predator like a big cat into the wild that was raised in captivity. There has been no successful uh, cat that was born in captivity, put back in the wild. And someone said, "Oh yeah, this happened once." Well, it was a billionaire's place in southern Sumatra, and so he had like the perfect forest, and it fenced, and he's got his private guards to keep out poachers. Now, there's only one of those in the world that I know of. So if there's only one place that a billionaire has, then yes, you still can't release because these cubs are never taught how to hunt by their mother because they're taken away from their mother at birth. So everything's all screwed up.
yeah. Where did your fascination for big cats and photography starts. Could you tell me a bit about your childhood and how that influenced your later career and obsession?
Yeah, well, I started being interested in photography when I was about 7 years old by looking at Life magazine and National Geographic. And then when I was 8 years old, I told myself, we were living out in the country in Indiana, south of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I remember laying on the living room floor in front of the fireplace, looking at both of these magazines, Life and NatGeo. And I said, I want to be a Nat Geo photographer when I grow up. To myself, there was no one else around that, even though no one's ever asked me that, did I tell anyone? And I just saw it. So I got my first camera when I was 7. And then, you get a camera and you take pictures of your family, where you live, things that you may be interested in because you're just a kid. And then, I worked through that in middle school. We had a newspaper. I was a photographer at the newspaper, then high school, photographer at the high school, and then yearbook. And then, I had to figure out what I was going to do for college. And I was doing anything creative means you're bringing a part of yourself to what you do. You're just not punching a time card 9 to 5. And so thinking about being a photographer was actually a bit scary. So I put into all the best photojournalism school, and I was accepted to every one with portfolio. But that meant that I had to bring that creativity out for everyone to see. That this photograph is some guy named Steve Winter, and I'd go to classes, blah, blah, blah. I should have done that, but I didn't do it. I went to Indiana University with my high school friend for a year and a half and then quit, went around the world, and then came back and started a job. I was living in Seattle, Bellingham, North there. And finally hated that job so much, I decided that I found schools in San Francisco that would take my credits from Indiana University. And I went to the Academy of Art at the University of San Francisco. And I did that. And then afterwards, I got my real education by being an assistant for Michael Nick Nichols before he was a Nat Geo photographer. And so that's where I got my real education. Because obviously, if I'd been taking pictures since I was 7 years old, I already knew a lot about photography. My dad had all these photo books, about the masters of photography, masters of painting, because he always taught me that, to really learn composition, lighting, things like that. Look at the masters of painting. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I worked for Nick, and then eventually, uh, he told me I should move to the East Coast and work for German magazines. A lot of the people that came through Nat Geo ended up working for German Geo. I worked for German Geo, but I worked for Stern, which was the biggest magazine in Europe. So a lot, to the point that sometimes it was like being a staff photographer there. I worked for 'em so much and just did a bunch of different stories. The design director liked my work a lot, and I worked with the science editor. And so I was really lucky, and then started working at Nat Geo.
Yeah. And what does being an assistant to a successful photographer give you in terms of real life value versus just going to university or reading books? Hey guys, first of all, I want to say thank you. There's one person who's been sharing the podcast more than anybody else, and that is you. The only reason why this podcast continues to grow is because you are sharing it. And my only ask is, if this podcast has provided value to you, or you think it'll provide value to somebody else, then if you could send them a DM of the link or a screenshot to the show, that would genuinely make my day. And it's the only way the podcast will continue to grow. That's my only ask of you. Thank you very much.
Well, what you're doing is actually what you just said, the real world, because this is how you make a living. And I think one of the biggest problems with people that go to art school or photo school or whatever is that you need to have a how to run a successful business class also. And they don't have that in most schools. Maybe they do now, but they didn't when I went. And you really need that because that's what you're doing. Yeah, you have to be creative and you have to have a unique vision. What's your unique vision? What's my unique vision? I guess I kind of know what it is now after all these years, but you have to develop that. But what does that have to do with making a living? You have to figure out how to run a business and how to be successful because you'll see some colleagues or peers and they're like, they're doing really great. They have a nice house, all that stuff. Unless they have money from their family, it's because they were able to be successful at running a business. And things have changed so dramatically than what it used to because there used to be a lot of resale money and reselling your images. And that's gone down the tubes now. But the bottom line is, I learned a lot working for Nick, what it was like dealing with magazines, dealing with art directors, dealing with photo editor, who organized, whether it was a photo story or a single image or an ad or whatever. And so you hear him on the phone, you're dealing with these people also. And that's very important. You're talking about budgets. What's it gonna cost to be able to pull the story or ad all. And so you learn how to do that, not by some teacher that says, "On Friday, bring me in a budget for this made up idea that somebody had." No, this is real. I want a budget for an hour, you know, and I was going to say TV show. That'd be now. But when I worked with NatGeo, it's on a budget for, you two guys flying wherever we're going. And the equipment needed everything to do within a budget and how much you're going to make, how much that you couldn't make in the future also of usage. And you learn all those things that you wouldn't really pay much attention in school, but this was really happening. You're speaking to someone from Vanity Fair or whatever magazine we were working with. We did a couple stories for Esquire. But it was cool, and it was different than what Nick was famous for later on. Uh, it was more people-oriented. Rolling Stone, we did some crazy stories for Rolling Stone. That was great.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So you mentioned kind of that the resale of your photos. Nowadays, it's much harder to make a profit or living from that. What are some kind of business tips for photographers entering the field in this era compared to
You're
nowadays?
talking to the wrong guy, bro. I had no idea. I just the other day, someone from the LA Times contacted me. And we were talking about something that I'd done and whether he used to work at NatGeo, so I've known him. And, I was talking about what I had done with my Hollywood Cougar picture. And a lot of people think, oh, you must have made a bunch of money off that. No, I gave it away. I gave it away to further move an idea about building the world's largest wildlife overpass down the road further by letting the person that was fundraising for it use my images and video for free. Because in the beginning, there was no money. And then there was a lot of money. But in the end, I had TV stations in LA call me up and go, we want to run this on the 5 or 6 or 10 o'clock news or something. And we need it right away. And this started happening so often that I'd be in the field or whatever. So I just ended up giving them everything I had and said, whenever you want to run something on P22 or mountain lions or this idea for a wildlife overpass that is over halfway built now, just use it. You don't need to ask me for permission. I'm giving you my permission by giving you the images and video that you need. And of course, that's no way to make a living by giving away your work. But in the end, you want your work to mean something, to make a difference. And people would say, well, then you must have enough money to pay the bills, or you must be doing well. We live in 700 square feet in Hoboken, New Jersey. We don't have a big retirement fund or anything like that. We're just getting by, and journalists don't make much money. And but we just feel that it's important for us to do what we do the way that we do it, because we've seen the pieces that we do make a difference. And there's a word I'm forgetting right now. But yeah, it means a lot to see these things happen, whether it's the passage of a law, um,
Would you
the
rather make,
closing down of a place that we know is involved in the blood
yeah.
market trade of cubs and cats, kind of.
So for you, it's more about making a difference on a global or local scale rather than just purely trying to make as much money from your images as possible. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because once the whole market died, it was like, well, we have to have something come out of it. Yeah. Now we have a nonprofit that someone offered to pay for, which was just an incredible opportunity. But we're not fundraisers, or we're no good at fundraising. And now we're actually in the hole on that. On that, we've spent more of our own personal money than, and we have a nonprofit called Big Cat Voices, and it did help fund the third trip because the budgets even at National Geographic have fallen so much. We're actually using our own money, and we're hoping to get it back by future donations to our nonprofit, Big Cat Voices.
I'll leave a link to it in the description.
Because you have something like a story for NatGeo. All right, we have a few more weeks still in the budget, but no expenses, because everything is so much more expensive than when I did the budget, and the budget was cut 5 times anyway. But you're gonna do it because the story has to be finished. So yeah, you do it and you go in the hole, and hopefully you'll be able to cover it later on. That's no way to run a business, by the way.
Yeah. Why is the NatGeo budgets decreasing? You mentioned that. What are the reasons for the budgets being cut?
I think that everything now, I mean, it's listen. people create certain things because they think there's a necessity in the world for what they want to create. And then people create things to make money, and those two can overlap. But if the magazine is not making money and you're a big multinational corporation like Disney is, um, they're used to making money. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart or something to keep the iconic, world famous National Geographic magazine that's been around since 1888 afloat if it's not making money. So I have no idea what their what anybody at Disney's thinking because I've never talked to anybody about it. But I think it's worthwhile to show the world in a magazine format because that's what I do. You know, I've also done a couple TV shows and I love that also. You had Bertie on here.
He's meant to come on in a couple months, actually. We had to
Oh,
reschedule.
good.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, he never stopped,
yeah,
kind of like us. We never stop either. Well, you'll learn all that from Bertie also.
yeah.
Um, but he's doing a great job because he's in the part that can make money. And, his series, Secrets of the Penguins, right now is the most popular series on Disney Plus. How that is fantastic that a wildlife series is the number one series on Disney Plus. Because people would go, well, that must not include Marvel. Well, I think number one series is number one series. And Marvel's included in that. But I have no idea, but it's just great what they do. And there's money in that. Um, where the magazine has struggled for years to turn a profit. And then they will turn a profit, but you have to keep making a profit. And any changes that are made may upset that balance with people going, oh, should I renew my subscription? And then they'll go, oh, I thought National Geographic quit publishing. No, they quit publishing a newsstand edition because you used to be able to go to an airport and you would see NatGeo there or Hudson News at the subway in New York or whatever. You could buy a copy of National Geographic. Now it's subscriptions only. And people may ask why. Well, obviously, the small amount of money that the subscriptions brought in wasn't enough to cover the printing costs or whatever. But you'd have to kind of, you know, Disney would have to almost like create the magazine as not a money making operation, you know, uh, because it has in the past, but maybe right now it's not. Because you have to have a really good people in there going, this is how we make money off of print media in this day and age. And what that answer is, besides a lot more ads, I have no idea. Yeah, unless you had people with a lot of money funding it. But then they would go, why should we give Disney money? They're a huge corporation. And when they bought NatGeo, the magazine came along with it. Hopefully that'll be there into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Bertie and how he's doing fantastic. You mentored him early in his journey. What stood out to you about him? What traits, habits, or approaches made you realize he was destined to break through in such a competitive field and succeed the way he is today?
Well, right off the bat, I knew he had passion. I could he adhered in what he spoke about. But we just hit it off in that pub in London after my editor, Kathy Moran, said to everyone that wildlife photographer of the year, Steve needs a new assistant. And Bertie was right there. And then the next day he was on stage after me at the Royal Geographical Society. And he like tried to talk like me in my supposed accent and brought the house down, and it was great. I was laughing. I was the only person in the balcony, so everybody can hear me laughing. And I saw something in him from what he showed right away, and I knew that I didn't want him as an assistant. I want him as a partner. And said, "Hey, I don't think you want to be a still photographer. I think you want to do video. So let's go meet the head of um, not marketing, but the person that says yay or nay to all the different shows that NatGeo does. Yeah, Janet Hanvitchering. So we went to see Janet. Bertie learned how to, we got all the gear that we needed. We went out to Vegas during the NAB show, got a giant Canon lens, got a camera from Brad, and we got the equipment that we needed for the second TV show. And the first one, we went and got stuff from the equipment room at Geographic and just figured out how to do it. And he went on YouTube where we're in the back seat going from one place to another. And I think we were in South Africa then. I asked him how he was learning to use the camera. It was a Sony camera at the time. And he says, "I'm on YouTube right now."
Wow.
So, you just do it. And I knew that's what he wanted to do. And it was the passion that he had. And I had another assistant, and that was South African anyway, Alex Bukowski. So, who's a PhD working in Uganda now for many years online. So, yeah, we started out, and I think it's super important to mentor young photographers or videographers. I mean, because we get a chance to have someone pay me to go in the field to do whatever project I'm working on. And the person you bring with you is vitally important. And that happened right in the beginning when I first started working on natural history shows. That I wanted to get someone that was, since I had been an assistant, I wanted somebody to partner on it, to share ideas. I learned from them, they learned from me, and we moved forward. And the first natural history story I did was on jaguar, but that was more of a slog, working with a lot of different scientists and trying to get the first pictures for the first jaguar story. And then when I did snow leopards next, as far as natural stories go, I worked with a woman, Emily, who was the assistant for my editor, Kathy Moran. And Emily really helped me out a lot. She grew up in the mountains of Wyoming, and we were working in the mountains of India and Himalayas, trying to find the secretive cat. And Emily was great to work with. And you always get something out of who you're working with, because everybody goes, "Oh, well, they're getting a great opportunity." Yes, but I am also by learning from them things that I didn't know that I would learn. And so every project I tried to mentor someone. But trust me, that always goes both ways. And it's real important to keep an open mind because people think, oh yeah, they're learning so much from you. But if you don't think you can learn something much from them, then you're kind of looking at it in a different way than I am.
Mm. And is that just a natural tendency for you to be curious and ask questions to them as well as them asking questions to you?
Could be, yeah. But I just know the way I wanted to be treated when I was working for Nick and how we worked together in that partnership type of deal, because that's what it was.
So do you kind of almost treat them as an equal or close to an equal when you're working in the
Yeah.
field? Mm.
I
It-
mean, they may be doing things that you don't want to do, like organize all the camera traps when we're going out. I mean, Bertie still did that, but Alex did it also because there was two of us, two of them doing all the stuff. But Bertie was doing, the main camera work. He taught Alex how to do the B camera, and then we had to put traps up and things like that. Because still, what's paying for a lot of it in the beginning was the magazine story, and then once you get a TV show that worked, well, then Janet's like, hey, when we went to do number two, she was like, well, you did number one. It was pretty good, or it was really good, or whatever. I don't remember what was said because Birdie was more involved in that because he was on his way.
Yeah. So is it important to make a kind of good first impression? So like when you and Bertie were doing the film, the fact that it did so well gave you guys a stack of proof to be like, look, we can do this again. And did that allow you to do another uh, kind of film after that?
Yeah, yeah, it actually did. Um, I knew he was going to be successful. I remember when we were shooting Jaguars, someone that had been a cameraman on Planet Earth was doing our planet on Jaguars down in the Pontinal where we were. And he said, hey, I'm putting your name in, Bertie, for the internship at BBC if you want. And then Bertie came to me that night and said, hey, I've been offered this. And I said, good. It always is a time where it's time for you to move on, or whoever you're working with to move on. That was a great opportunity for him. It's like getting a PhD in wildlife filmmaking by going to be one of the interns or assistants or whatever they call 'em at the BBC Natural History Unit. So that was great. I just had to go find someone else to help me, but I had Alex still, man. So that's good.
Was it just the passion that made him stand out versus other assistants in the past or in the future that you've had?
No, no, there's so much that, you say, hey, Bernie, how'd you get involved in this? I mean, I started doing this when I was really young, but so did Bernie. Bertie went and worked with coastal wolves and a tourism operation on Vancouver Island when he was, I think, 16, 17 or 17, 18. And then the 18 or 19, he went to Peru and the Amazon or somewhere down in South America. I don't remember, but he had that passion. He was doing things on his own that he wanted to do or see. And he did, yeah, it really made me know that he was the right person when I said, well, how'd you get money to do these things? And he said, well, I went on the helicopter's website. That was before drone. Um, and noticed that they had really old pictures. And he did the same thing with the jungle lodge. And so he offered his services to them in exchange for a free room or a free helicopter ride so he could do aerial. Um, and then it was right when drones were coming out, but I'm sure he didn't have the money to buy one. Um, But yeah, and as soon as I heard that's what he was doing, then that was really cool that he found a way to do it no matter what his financial situation was. He got down there and then found ways to make it all happen. And that's how you find the answers to all your questions. You know, how am I going to do this? Well, you come up with good answers, new answers, answers that are creative. That's really important.
Yeah. It's
So
kind of,
I knew he was going to succeed and right away.
and it's kind of that persistence, but also, like you said, the passion as well, because a lot of people may have been put off if they didn't have the money for it, but he saw an opportunity and then, like
Right.
you said, provided the service because he knew this is what I want to do. I'm really passionate about this. And if I keep going and keep contacting these people and offering my service, I'll eventually get a break.
It was kind of the same with me. There was no way I wasn't going to be a National Geographic photographer. Because, see, part of it was it's the only thing I ever wanted to do. So it got to the point that I was like, how could I even look in the mirror and go, are you going to make it? Yeah. And the answer was yes, you're going to. You have no choice because literally that was the only thing I wanted to do. And so you're going to find a way to do it. I started and it was, I had a happy accident where the deputy director of photography at NatGeo, I had an appointment with her on a Wednesday. The Friday before, she called me to go do a story on a kids adventure camp in Vermont. And she'd asked Nick Nichols to do it because he was a staff photographer. And back then, if you were a staff photographer, whatever magazine needed photography, whether it was the kids magazine or the travel magazine or the Yellow Border, the iconic National Geographic magazine, you went and did it. But Nick had just come back from Africa for the Yellow Border. I can't remember what story it was, but he said, "Oh, good." He called me, he said, "You're home. Don't leave. You're going to get a phone call from the woman you're supposed to see next Wednesday, but she's going to ask you if you can leave tomorrow, or whatever day, because I may have needed the equipment. So it could have been Monday or something, but because I could have gotten the equipment needed. And so, yeah, I didn't have to see her on Wednesday because I went and did a great job. They put a picture on the cover. And she said, "Hey, you want to redo our kids magazine?" Because I'd done a bunch of work for UNICEF. That's how they found. UNICEF will used to give you money. You'd go to another country, you'd get the exotic people and landscapes and I think of things in more of a biological terms now. Back then, I was a photojournalist, but and then you would do one of cover photograph for one of their vaccination programs or whatever. But you got to go to somewhere exotic, and and so that's what they had seen of mine that made them want to call me. And then when Nick said, "Yeah, call Steve. He was supposed to see you on Wednesday. He'll do it." So that was it. Now off I went. Then you learn once you get in the door how to keep going through that door and going to the next room, up to the next floor, the next floor. And you don't stop till you make it all the way to where you want to be, which means you can't screw up. You're always there. Everything you do is a success unless there's some unusual problem that keeps you from succeeding, whether it be political, Mother Nature, or something else. But just to be sure that you're going to make it all the way.
Yeah. And what was going through your mind when after the phone call and once you packed your bags and you were doing your like first NatGeo assignment, were you super, super confident or were you very kind of nervous and not sure what was going to happen and uncertain?
I
What was your
think
mind?
you always, I think, you're always going to be a little nervous, I think. But I think in the end, this is what I did, whether it was working with Nick years before or when I had moved to the New York area, I was doing, single pictures for the News Weekly, which was really boring as hell in the end because they would put you into a certain area. And for me, it was kind of economy. So I knew I could do it. What it was is to try to find images that were new to me. Always, you're trying to look for something your editor hasn't seen before. And even there on the first one, it was like, okay, they gave me a list of things that they wanted and then asked me to add to that. So I need to get great pictures that I love. And so I did everything that I could think of. And there was only one thing that I even did, and it ended up being a great picture, but I hated doing it. And that was working inside a cave, which was how Nick became famous, doing these 3-page fold-outs in Geo of guys going down or up a rope in a cave, and they would blow off a old flash bulb, which looked like a big light bulb. And then it's only one, it looks like there's 5 people on a rope. It's the same person, just they just go down, move down. And so I did some in a cave, and that was successful. And where did everything they asked to do, I tried to do the best of my ability at the time. And they loved it.
And why didn't you not like doing the cave photo?
And probably I have a bit of claustrophobia.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you mentioned kind of opening the door and then continuing to open the door and working your way up until the top. What are some recommendations or some tips of how you can keep improving, keep opening the door and making sure you get another assignment for uh, organizations like NatGeo?
Well, I used to know what it was in NatGeo. I'm not sure it's the same in, you know. I think I don't think that people are still interested in natural history photography. People love looking at animal pictures. And I know that because they tell me that they do, when you meet them somewhere. So I would think that if you're interested in that, look for something that you haven't seen before. So I said how important it was to bring back images that my editor, Kathy Moran, hadn't seen before. But what you can start with the story. Is it unique? Has Nat Geo done it in the past decade? Um, what are the images that the last person got? How can you do something different and find something that hasn't been done before? So, but it has to be a animal that the magazine wants to do a story on. So give yourself a couple options. So you're not just, you don't have just one thing you're going to say, hey, I got a proposal, it's great, but you only got one of them. Well, what if they don't like it? Then you're left with nothing. So have 2, 3, 4 different things. Even though I know that's difficult because to really do it, you have to have all your ducks in a row, working with the scientists, local people. You can get into the country and do journalism, whether you need a permit or not. You have to get the permit, which costs money, but you don't want to spend the money if you don't have the assignment. But I mean, a lot of things have changed at the magazine. So we were just laying out my last story just the other day, like 2 days ago. So things have changed a lot in many of the processes. But as far as I know, the readership of National Geographic to this day loves natural history stories and stories about animals and the world in which we live. So do it. And the other thing that it's funny that they said to me is uh, they said, I think we have enough people in the story because it's a story about living with a predator um, and coexisting at how lions and people coexist in the same landscape. And so it's great that maybe that had too many people pictures. But the other thing is, I started off as a photojournalist. And you find a lot of natural history photographers, people have said, I don't really do animals or I'm not good at it. Well, you better learn how, not animals, people. You better learn how to do people because number one, we are animals and we're a part of any story that you could think of doing on this planet because we have affected the weather. Well, so many different things. There's no way the hand of humanity has not touched something that you want to do that's on the face of this earth. So learn how to work with people and learn how to photograph. And there's a lot of portraits being done. That's an easy way to start. But that's the wrong thing to say because portraits are not easy. They look easy, but they are not. But you got to learn how to work with people and animals at the same.
And how do you approach someone you want to take a portrait of, especially if they're a stranger? You just mentioned how difficult portraits can be. So what are some tips for approaching people that you don't know and trying to get a good shot of them?
I have no idea. You just do it. No, no, no. It is funny. Yeah. Because it's like, hey, I need to get a picture of you. And it's like, well, hey, maybe I should do this or that. You end up wanting to ask them. It's the same as that partnership with an assistant instead of them being an assistant. Do this, do that. It's like you're a partnership with the person you're working with also. It's like I need to get a great portrait of you that number one, you're gonna love and will tell your story. Someone's gonna know something of how you fit within the story we're working on by this portrait. So you got any ideas? And then just the fact that you're having a back and forth communication about the portrait with the person that's going to be in it is helpful. You know, it kind of helps open doors and break down the barriers of people might be, a little nervous in front of the camera. But when you ask them for their ideas, then that is helps kind of break down that nervousness that can be created by just saying, "Okay, I need to get your picture now," and they're like, "What?" They're like, "I hate getting my picture taken." You'll hear this, so it's like, "Oh no, well, let's figure out some way that people will know who you are and what you do by this portrait." And you got any ideas? And then it'll just happen.
Yeah. And what do you do if they're like have a different speak a different language or they're from maybe a quite niche culture like a tribe? If you photograph any like tribes around that
Yeah.
type of people.
Yeah, no, 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 but you're always going to have someone that speaks that language a little bit. But here, we're using DSLR. You take a picture of someone, turn the camera around and show it to them. They know exactly what you're doing, and they go, "Oh," and all of a sudden them seeing themselves on the back of the camera, and then you put the camera back up to your eye. they're going to get, oh, you're going to take another one. I get to see myself again. Yeah. And they understand. Trust me, they understand more than we do, especially if they are from somewhere in living in our natural world. They understand a hell of a lot more than we do.
Yeah. 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 If society collapsed, they probably have the highest chance of living it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they're the ones that are going to make it.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind
But
of almost like,
not everybody lives in the city because I've come into people that can't believe what I did. And to me, it's kind of like, well, this is what I've been doing for, when I was a kid, starting off being a Boy Scout and all that kind of stuff. Same kind of thing, I just travel around the world doing it. And it's exhausting. I've been to 7 countries in 7 months. Maybe I already said that, but yeah. And if I did, it's because I can't remember because I'm so exhausted from being in 7 countries for 7 months.
yeah, of course.
We want to be home with the dogs, and soon we'll be moving to be with our son, granddaughter, and daughter-in-law in LA. So that's going to be great. And to come home to a bubbly 6-year-old granddaughter will be great, which is what we used to because they used to live 10 minutes away.
Uh, yeah, I guess it's always something to look forward to if you're near your family
Oh,
after being
yeah.
away for so long. Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
People always say, well, where do you want to go when you're not working? And I go, home.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people wouldn't
And
expect
when
that.
you start doing this, you're going to probably have the exact same answer, home, because the more people that do it when they're asked to, somebody was talking the other day, I can't remember who it was, but they had the same answer. Oh, my son. Yeah. It was like, what do you want to do? He's got to fly tomorrow to go from LA to Vermont or Boston and drive up. And he goes, I just want to be home. And he said, see, this is why I always wanted to be home and why I got a sat phone. The first sat phone when that any of my colleagues, well, you couldn't get one. It was Department of Defense and oil companies or mining companies only. And I was like, that's a bunch of bullshit. I should be able to get a sat phone. Number one, if something happens to me in the middle of nowhere, I want to get rescued. But in reality, I just want to call home every day. I put it on my story budget. And then that kind of snowballed, and other people, wives or partners said, hey, you get a sat phone too and call me. Some people didn't want any connection to their normal life. I needed that connection. So
Why do people not want one, do you think? Like a connection?
maybe they thought they were going to do a better job by not having the outside world encroach mentally on their day-to-day activities. That's one thing I can think of. But for me, um, the story is right in front of you, but you're not always doing it at the night. And then at night, like when you're trying to sleep, I'd much rather pick up the phone and say good morning because I'm halfway around the world. I'm going to sleep. Sharon's just waking up. So I'm saying good morning. And then when I wake up, I'm calling and saying good night. If I would be lucky enough to get 8 hours sleep when you're in the field. But to me, it was really important to have that connect. No connection, we wouldn't be together right now. And now we've been working together for many years. And we just did the last NatGeo story together, the one before together. And then Tiger and working on P22, and we've done so many things. And having that sat phone was vitally important to the decade when I first started being away from home a lot. It was super important to hear to hear her voice from me. And even if there were problems at home and there was nothing I could do about it, at least I would hear about them and wish I could help. Or, you know,
Yeah. So did it give you energy and motivation?
yeah.
You said for other people it might have been distracting, but was it the opposite for you?
And it was the total opposite for me. I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to hear Nick's voice, hear how everybody was doing, just with things at home. And, sometimes I may hold the phone out here because she's not too happy with me being gone or saying that I'm going to be gone longer because I didn't get something that I have to get. Because that's part of it is that to get these pictures that haven't been seen before, you may have to do things above and beyond what you would normally do. And that may not, means you're away from home longer, which is very tough
Yeah,
to
for
do.
sure. Yeah. And how has being in remote locations away from your family for months on end, and not knowing when you're gonna get the shot, how has that them experiences kind of changed you internally as a person?
I really couldn't. I mean, you don't give up, but it's really difficult because you putting not giving up and getting what you need to get with being away from your family. They don't always jive. And in the end, you become successful at what you're doing. And hopefully that success will help with the quote business of photography and the helping make a difference because the story that you've done is reaching more people and people want to know more about what you're doing. If they look at the story and go, hey, I'm interested in that cat. Let me find out. And in there, they'll find out that there's issues, you know. From the first story I did on jaguars, every cowboy thought the only good jaguar was a dead jaguar because every dead cow was the fault of a jaguar. It turned out to be ridiculous. It was not true. And that's how I started working with scientists. I convinced my then best friend, Alan Rabinowitz, to do the first GPS sat college study on a big cat on jaguars to find out, the answer to this. Yeah, they kill all these cows. Well, they're living in an area where everything they'd ever want to eat is right in front of them. So why would they go through that barbed wire fence to kill a cat? And if they're a sick mom or a mom with cubs who's having trouble hunt, or an old cat, maybe, because it turns out to be a very small percentage of jaguars that actually kill cows. And then another study was done saying a cow is worth $2,000 in its lifetime. But every jaguar in this now tourism area of Porto Joffre and the Pantanal, each jaguar brings in $108,000 every year in ecotourism income. So nobody's going to kill one of these animals. Every time I did one of these never done before stories, there becomes a tourism operation coming in because you could never see jaguars before we found this spot. I found it because a Brazilian scientist found it and told me to come down and work with him before he had to go to his biological scholarship at Imperial College of London. Then I worked with another scientist and the ranger for Pontotoc National Park. And that's when I started figuring out how to work with people that did not know even how to say hello in English. And I didn't know any Portuguese, but I had a dictionary. So the story started and you figure out how to make it work. Because guess what? You have no choice. Unless you have enough money to get a full-time translator. And trust me, I did not the money for that.
Yeah. And this is the
Uh,
amazing thing about photography is the fact that, it debunks these myths that are harming our wildlife, but also you said about the tourism thing where now there's tourist things popping up after your story. So that's going to benefit the
right.
local economy as well. And it's kind of bridging the gap between science and the public.
Well, it was very important with the local people because now, number one, they're going to believe what they believe, even though many will say, well, they just did this study and it said that, snake bite disease, quicksand, those are the 3 out of 5 things that'll kill cattle. I mean, who the hell decided to put a cattle ranch in the world's largest inland wetland anyway? That floods 12 feet of water every rainy season. That's stupid. But having an answer, because people, there's always negative things that happen when you're working with predator. And so if you bring in some like a tourism operation, and in the Pantanal, it's a bunch of tourism operations. And every time I've gone back, I'm going, why is the government not here regulating how many boats can look at one cat? Because it puts so much pressure on the animal. And we've seen this happen in many different locations. I think with jaguars, all that cat has to do is turn around and walk the opposite direction because nobody may know where he's going or he or she is going unless they know this is like a little piece of land that there's another river on the other side, which I know places in the Pantanal that are like that. But, and many places are putting too much pressure on them, but it makes a huge difference in the Pantanal because these cowboys won't kill these cats because they themselves have a family member or someone they know, a relation that works in the tourism industry. So then they're not going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg, the thing that they hated before they supposedly hated. But it even turned out the guys that were hunting jaguar were doing it because on Saturday they couldn't get into Poconé and back by Monday morning at 6 a.m. to start work. So they would hunt jaguar on Sunday. As for something to do, and
Oh, what, just as a
whoever was,
hobby?
yeah, whoever
Wow.
was the guy that got the last jaguar on the ground off of his horse and shot with a pistol, which is usually what happened, because the jaguar will go through, silence every dog, either kill or maim it, or the dog will just run away because like I'm not messing with that jaguar. And then the cowboys get down from their horses to look to be sure their dogs are okay or get them taken away from the area so they're on the ground. And about 50% of the cats that were killed were shot with a pistol. So whoever did that was like Macho Man of the week or the month or whatever. But they were all saying that it was because jaguars were killing the cattle. Well, it wasn't. It was not, and it took a long time to figure that out. Are you close to the ocean?
Yeah. I've got it outside my window because
Yeah, I
I can
thought
see
I
it
heard
from.
seagull.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, there's so
Uh,
many around there. They're very loud. They've got all the
uh,
babies. There's there's a whole like Greek tragedy drama with the seagulls outside. The babies are fledging now, and then there's been like a
yeah,
dead one on the road. Like adults are attacking them because they've like marked on their territory. There's like these little runts
right.
that are still fluffy and need the parent support, and then there's the other siblings that have flown off and independent. It's a whole Greek tragedy. This whole story here.
That's great. Where you at?
Falmouth in Cornwall.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Falmouth. Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
great.
Um,
Wonderful.
I was going to say about the Jaguar thing. With it seems that to solve a lot of these problems, these conflicts with predators and humans, a lot of it's kind of aligning incentives. Because you said about how they stopped killing the jaguars because one of their friends or family members work in the tourism
Right.
sector. And beforehand, when there was no tourism, they could do what they want because there wasn't that kind of incentive for them to not kill it. But now they have family members who earn a living from the jaguars. The incentive
Right.
is let's not kill it. So is one of the
Right.
solutions to these conflicts between predators and humans is to make sure the incentive to keep the animal alive is the case on both maybe the farmer's end and the general public's end and the government's end, and
So you were talking about the importance of
aligned incentives,
yeah.
kind of
Well, I
incentivization.
think right in the beginning, I wasn't sure what a difference that this would make by bringing tourism in. I didn't think about it at all. I was just trying to find a way to, number one, the first ranch I worked on was two brothers that were billionaire. They owned the biggest paper company in all of Brazil, the Cabelin brother. Um, so I was trying to have a scientific project that they could understand because they told me we're constantly being hounded, but maybe not hounded, but we're constantly being asked by people that are trying to get their master's or a doctorate or postdoc project or whatever to come and work on our ranches. But they never have a solution that helps us manage the ranch better, manage the situation between jaguars and our cattle. So I knew right away that these guys were looking for an answer. So that's why I asked Alan. I said, "Hey, I talked to the owner. One of them's the former mayor of Rio. You know, these are intelligent people." And so I I wanted to get the project to the point that it would make a difference to them. And that happened one day when I was with the scientist that took over Sandra Cavalcanti. In fact, she was the one that I said, "Hey, who's your boss?" And she goes, "Alan Rabinowitz." I said, "Great, he's my best friend. I'm going to try to get him to put up the money to do this study because we can make a difference. If these guys, Farm Rio, well, biggest paper company, if they'll say that whatever happens to this project, they'll publicize the finding." And so what happened one day is one of the brothers called up and said, your jaguar killed my cow last night." And Sandra opens the computer, looks at the map, finds out where the jaguars in that area were. And she says, "Hey, are you at your ranch house? Can I come over and see you?" So they'd come in from Rio and we're at the brother's house. So I went over and she opened the computer and said, "This is where that cat was last night, 11 kilometers away." And he goes, this is the science we've been waiting for. Something that we can use because if the jaguar didn't kill the cow, then what did? Because we got our ranch managers telling us that it was a jaguar, or one of the cowboys telling us in front of the jaguar. And if they go and find out that, well, no, it wasn't, that's super important.
Yeah.
So they could use that. And they ended up building a biological station. They ended up building a bunkhouse and part of it, a room for a woman since Sandra needed her own room. And so they supported the project till they didn't, because billionaires do whatever they want to do. That's because they're billionaires. They can do whatever they want. And they decided they didn't want any more after a couple of years. But a lot of great science was done during the times that they were able to work on this ranch. Now the nephew runs it, and it's a jaguar tourism operation because he lets the jaguars eat as many cows as they want. And you can actually see the jaguar by seeing the jaguar on a dead cow.
Wow.
So this is in the southern Continental. It's a very famous place now, and they don't really advertise it. Or I don't think that come see my jaguars eat my cattle herd of 50,000 head, because I don't care if they do kill them because I got so many cows. But even that's a little touchy, because if it goes to the next ranch, unless they have set up a wildlife, insurance program for that ranch, or what should be mandated on all these tourist projects. If you're going to do that, you benefit from jaguars being on your property. And you're saying they don't eat cattle. Well, in the next door, that the ranch manager, the owner knows that it's a jaguar, then you need to compensate them for the cattle that they're losing. But at the same time, you have to be sure that they have a healthy population of prey for those jaguars. And if you have any cowboys on your property, or you yourself are just hunting, something the jaguar may want to eat. But number one food source in the northern continental for a jaguar is a caiman. Number two, a capybara. And no one kills caiman or capybara for fun. It'd be more like a deer, so you'd have venison or something like that.
And what was the main thing killing the cattle? If it wasn't the jaguars, what was actually the main causes of the
I
cattle?
think when I said that, they were saying disease, snake bite. We saw so many cows that were stuck in the mud, and you'd have to get a rope around them and then pull them out with either a couple of horses, if you could get a caterpillar in there, um, some kind of machinery to help pull the cow out. I hated seeing the cow stuck in there because, you know, it's still an animal, and you don't want it dying because it can't get out of the mud. And a lot of times there would be younger cows that would get stuck there because the other ones would go around. But you learn so much on every story that you do. Like the tiger story I did was primarily about getting a picture of the Indo-Chinese tigers too much and tiger, and then approaching the problem of poaching and the issue about using tiger parts for traditional medicine. And then how that then also related to jaguars on the second jaguar story, because jaguars were all of a sudden being hunted again for the Chinese market, is what they said. A new type of market. All they were doing, they were killing the jaguar for canines. And then they expanded it from 4 canines, they added the bone, because in most areas where they were using lion bones or tiger bones for tiger bone wine was one of the biggest things. But they were taking the canines, and either they had magical power, or they ground them up and put them in something where you're supposed to get the strength of a jaguar. with the canine, supposedly the second strongest jaw strength of any animal in its area besides its prey, the caiman, which has strongest jaw strength. So you learn all these little things. And every story also had an interest, whether it would be leopards were being persecuted, most persecuted cat on the planet. And I wanted to do a story about the fact that there was a group of leopards in the center of Mumbai just to show people something different and then weave that in with the problem that they've had with leopards attacking humans. Why would they be attacking humans? Because um, in the north part of India, all the native forests were cut down and pine trees were planted by the British, or they brought them in. And there's no understory of plants for ungulates to eat. It's just pine nettle, or needles as we call them, and there's nothing green underneath there. So it means in 2 weeks I saw 2 deer. And so you don't have a prey population for the leopard. So they're going after livestock. And if there's not livestock there, they'll grab a kid or somebody else and attack them.
Yeah. And how has your work being so close to these dangerous or big cats, how has that changed your perception of them and the risk and humanity in general? How has your view changed over the years since you started working with these big cats?
I've always thought that I've always looked at big cats as being so close to us as humans. So many when I actually posted on Instagram when we first were getting the NatGeo Instagram rolling. I used to say how looking at a mother and cubs reminded me so much of a mother and her baby and her toddler or young 1 or 2 year old. It reminds me so much of their when they're playing, nursing, feeding, messing around. You see all the people always used to say don't anthropomorphize animals. I always said bullshit. The closer that we can be to animals, the more likely our lives are going to be much better, and theirs also. Because you need these top predators in every ecosystem to keep that ecosystem healthy. I mean, when the FAO does a story about healthy ecosystems and crop yields, that's an interesting topic. When you bring back predators to a certain area, they maybe have patchy forests in certain places. But you bring a cat back, like a leopard or a tiger or something to this area, or lions or whatever. All of a sudden, you have a healthy ecosystem, and you get 34% higher crop yields in agriculture that's next to healthy forests, a healthy ecosystem. Is why you start with the pollinators and then go from there. So, these animals are very important within their family and their ecosystem. A lot of people don't know that. But it's just one of the things you learn because I have no background in biology at all. None.
I had
But I've just learned it in the field.
yeah, I had Ross Barnett on the show a few weeks ago, and he's kind of wrote a book on the missing links and kind of describing or advising links reintroduction in the UK, because especially in areas like
Oh,
Scotland,
yeah.
we have such a bad deer problem, and one way to solve that would be to introduce links because they specialize in hunting deer, and that would
Well, they do, but then who's going to be sure that people are hunting all that the lynx are going to have enough their prey base is going to be good enough that they don't go start going hunting link because there's like, you just killed my chickens. My chickens were giving me eggs. Now I don't have eggs. My kids are asking me, why don't we have eggs today? Well, the lynx are eat our chicken. And hopefully there would be a way that you could um, do that because I've heard about it and I'm more power to everybody involved. But you have to have everybody on board. Sometimes it takes a while for certain farmers to come on board because of the issue surrounding what I just said, that if they can't find any deer, even though you're saying there's a ton of them around, if they don't find any deer and they go in a chicken coop, you're going to make some farmers really angry.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that'll probably end up being in the news and causing more backlash than you would have hoped for, right?
Well, there's an answer there. We probably just want to be able to go in with your eyes wide open and understanding that if you're going to reintroduce a predator into an ecosystem, that ecosystem also involves every one of those farmers, even the ones that go, if you introduce this and I see one, I'm going to shoot it as soon as I see it, to the point where it's like, hey, things have really changed. Our deer population has gone down and we're having all these problems with the deer eating everything. So you're going to get, once those people get on board because they see their landscape changing, they see the addition of that animal in a positive way after maybe seeing it in a negative way if it did kill a couple chickens or something. But you just have all your bases covered
Yeah.
because it's a really important thing to reintroduce predators into ecosystems where they're going. Supposedly, they're going to try to reintroduce mountain lions into the eastern part of the United States. The eastern mountain lion has gone extinct, but there are ones that have come from the west. I mean, I don't know how many years ago it was. One came from the Black Hill
Where the Black Hills?
in South Dakota, and it walked all the way to Connecticut and got hit by a car.
Really? Why would it
Yeah,
be going that
it
far?
walked into Canada over Lake Superior, which is almost further north Great Lake, and then all the way down and end up getting killed. And they know it because they're captured by part of the Black Hill State Park Fish and Game of South Dakota, which I worked with when I did that NatGeo Cougar story. And they had the animal put a chip in the animal because they had captured it and chipped it. Some they put collars on, but this one they put a chip in. So they knew everything about the cow, except exactly how it got from the Black Hills to Connecticut. And who knows? Who knows? It's one of the mysteries of wildlife. It's why'd you go so far? Supposedly it was a young male that was dispersing, trying to find his own territory. And he kept going and going and going. I thought it's because he probably went south around Chicago through northern Indiana, where I'm from. And he'd keep going because there's nothing there. There are some deer, so he might find some to eat for a while, and cows and chickens and pigs and soybeans and corn. But if it went up, I would think that it may have had more food, but I have no idea why it didn't stop and go, this is good enough. I kind of like it here, but it just kept going.
Yeah.
Poor
Yeah.
guy.
What's the hardest truth about wildlife photography today that most people aren't prepared to hear, do you think?
I think we have, people say this to me a lot. It's not just wildlife photography. It's like how we get the images that we find are important to us. And hopefully you go out with an idea of what maybe you want. Or, I mean, I'm the type of person that I would not even look at stories that what people had done beforehand. And that could have been stupid in a way. And you have to acknowledge when you could have maybe done things differently. It may have been good for me had I looked at what other people had done. Um, I find that there's this attitude. I grew up when we were shooting film. So what you shot was what you got because it was on a piece of a slide film. Now people like, I can crop it. Don't worry, I can crop it, whatever I need. I got a huge file. No, when you're working at NatGeo, they want to see the picture that you got in the camera, cropping in camera. They can crop it any way they want because in the end, they paid for the story. And they're going to crop it to move it because there's a gutter in the magazine. It's not like having the magazine on your computer screen right here in front of you. But I hear this a lot. And I always say, hey, if you were a painter and you spent like a couple months or a year on a painting, all of a sudden they go, well, I'm going to take like, I'm going to take 1 foot off the right hand side, 1 foot off the bottom. No. Then he takes a pair of scissors and cuts it. No, they're not going to do that. So spend more time composing the image that you really, even when you're shooting and things are going really quick. I've sometimes taken my zoom and zoomed out on something if I have an animal in an area because it's like, oh, I don't want to cut off their tail. I don't want to cut off their nose and all that. It's like I'm still better off trying to get the tight shot, the shot that I want, even though I shoot wide, medium, and tight on everything. But I still try to get that composition in camera. And but if you need to crop in the end, you crop. But a lot of people are just like, I don't need to worry about it. And it's like it's not even in their mind. But you need to think about getting things people haven't seen before. Push yourself to try to find images that you wouldn't have thought that you would want or you didn't even think about.
And why
But
didn't
you're
you?
not going to think about it if you're not thinking about composing something different or you're not thinking about what image you want out of this situation or that situation. If you're not thinking about it, you're obviously not going to get something unique unless it's a mistake or Mother Nature helped you, and all of a sudden you got something.
Yeah, it's being intentional when you frame.
Yeah,
You know,
but I
it's
just think thinking about it and helping yourself by saying this is the composition that I'm thinking about.
yeah. Do you
And
visualize it before?
I have things like, well, when you get pushed into a corner, when I was trying to get the Hollywood Cougar, I was trying to get a picture with a mountain lion on a trail in the Santa Monica National Recreation Area or Griffith Park that showed the lights of LA in the background. And because I kept getting no from the scientist when I'd say, hey, do you have any trails where you have mountain lions that have lights of LA in the background? No. And not no with an explanation, just no. Well, what about the trail above Malibu? He says, I don't walk on that trail because there's too many people, so I don't put any night traps up there. It turns out he puts all his traps in dry riverbed, which is smart because that's where these cougars go. And so that was something that I learned. But as I was getting all these no's, it was to the point that he was getting ready to leave to go back to his room. And we were in the Holiday Inn in Bozeman, Montana, at a mountain lion meeting they have every 2 years. So I finally said, the picture I really need to show people urban wildlife would be to get a mountain lion with the Hollywood sign. I didn't say under or above or whatever. I just said a mountain lion with the Hollywood sign. And he looked at me like I was crazy. But I had envisioned that because I knew what Griffith Park looked like. Uh, I knew what the area where he was working looked like because he'd never worked in Griffith Park because there hadn't been a mountain lion there since 2006. I knew there were mountain lions there because when I was a kid, I used to go on pony rides in Griffith Park with my grandma. So, but I envisioned that, but that's because I was using camera trap. But when I set my camera traps up, that would have an infrared beam and now a LiDAR beam. I would compose that first picture so the camera was in the exact spot that I would want to be if I could be there when the cat walked by. But whether it be my first real camera trap story, snow leopards, or trying to get cougars, I looked at that first frame as one I could compose myself. And there was no way a cat was going to walk by. In fact, NatGeo TV said, hey, we want to start doing video and get the mountain lion in Griffith Park in it. And we said we were going to go sit in blind. I go, you could sit in the blind till Griffith Park freezes over. You're never going to see that mountain lion. Because I just spent a year and a half there and I never saw him. Yeah.
So did you spend a year and a
And
half without seeing it at
so
all, even
I,
in camera traps?
oh no, we got him on the camera traps even before we got the Hollywood Cougar. I mean, getting the Hollywood Cougar picture took 15 months. Getting the picture of him with the lights of LA in the background took 11 months. But I didn't know it was going to take that long. And then I got him on video, but then he got maimed from eating animals that had eaten rat poison. So he was eating like weasels and raccoons and things like that, coyotes that would eat things and it goes up through the food chain. Because everybody in that area, like Beverly Hills and Brentwood, places like that, a lot of the open areas that's not private property have ground cover. And it's low-lying ground cover that mice and moles and things can go under without people seeing them. And they have their holes there. So a lot of people hate the moles because they're on their property could be a house on a cliff. And you start putting a lot of holes in that cliff by moles, and you're weakening that. So they put rat poison everywhere. So P22 had mange from that, which eventually affects the brain. And so he moved from where he was all the way down to the houses at the Hollywood Hill. And I couldn't put cameras there because I'd have to go to somebody's front door and go, hey, can I put a camera trap in your backyard? Because there's a mountain lion there. That's before everybody knew that they really would have no problem with this cat being there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And so what goes through your mind when you have the shot in your head and you know it's possible, but it hasn't happened yet and it's been 10, 11, 12 months without any kind of reward?
yeah, I think, it was like Sharon says to me that the one that bothered her the most was much shorter than that. But I went back on the tiger story to get a mom and cub. And Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve in central India, I had left. And I said, hey, if you get any pregnant females that have kids that are tiger cubs, let me know. And so I went home, and a couple weeks later, they say, well, we haven't found the den yet, but we know she's got her cubs somewhere close to this anti-poaching patrol camp. So I said, well, I'm going to come back. And every day I would get on the anti-poaching patrol elephant. A lot of people are going to say, you're not supposed to ride elephants. I don't ride elephants unless my subject does. The reason they ride elephants is because it's too dangerous to get into the forest any other way, because the tigers will kill them. And they're at an area that's close to the border of the park with a female with 3 cubs. But so every day I would go out, I may come back, saw nothing today. I think I read something like 15 books on my Kindle. And one day I saw, maybe glimpsed a cub as it was crying for mom to help it walk through this little creek that was up by the cave where the den was. And one day turned into 1 week, 1 week turned into 2 weeks, then 3 weeks. On the 24th day, I was reading my Kindle, and all of a sudden, the mahout says, Steve, and I look up, and I see an ear of a cub that is nursing. They've never nursed outside the den before. And so I put the camera up, and the cub gets up and walks over mom's legs, so her head's right next to mom. There's ferns in it. Luckily I had put the 600. I felt something that day, so I put the 600 on the tripod that was attached to this elephant seat that had a metal on all 4 corners. So I had tied a big Gitzo tripod to it with cable ties and rope. And I had so I had put my second camera on it. So I was all ready to go, which I did do every day. Yeah. I saw it. I got 5 pictures. Only one of them was sharp because the elephant's always moving. And I finally got it. But Sharon, every night she would go, how are you doing that? You know, you're trying to stay so positive. You sound so positive. I said, eventually the cubs are going to become accustomed to that elephant. They're not really looking at me. They're looking at the elephant. But mom sleeps directly below the elephant. The elephant never steps on the tiger. The elephant has known that tiger since he was a cub, because she was only 4 years old. This was her first litter. And so I always believed we were going to get it. Did I believe I was going to get one of the best pictures I've ever seen of a mom and cub? No. But we never know what we're going to get in the end. But you just don't ever give up. And I got something that I couldn't have imagined. I would have got, because it was much better than anything that I could envision at the time. But looking at the area, that's kind of what I wanted.
Yeah.
And then when you're thinking of them on camera trap, you know whether you have that opportunity or not. If it's just like, oh, I wish I could get a picture of the guy that walks on the moon. Well, you're never going to get it because there's no guy who walks on the moon. So if you know the cat's there and it walks on that trail, or it does whatever you think it's going to do, you're going to get it.
Yeah. Persistence is key.
Yeah. And I thought 3, 4, 5, 6 months was a long time on snow up. And then you just don't need 15 months. Part of it was finding the right trail because it's a 4-second exposure to the Hollywood Cougar picture. Because so I needed to find some place that was black behind the cat. So the flashes went off and it was open for 4 seconds to get the Hollywood sign. And the reason why the Hollywood sign hasn't been lit since 1932, when it said Hollywood Land and 28, I think when it went up for 24. I have no idea when. But it was so bright when people started buying the houses that were there. They finally said, the light's too bright, take the lights off of it. And they did, and they've never put them back. So I needed the light bouncing off the clouds. Just the light of LA bouncing off the clouds would light those white letters, Hollywood. And listen, you got a cat, everybody loves big cats. You got Hollywood, everybody loves Hollywood. And so everybody fell in love with P-22. It was a celebrity in the land of celebrity. And, then Beth Pratt, who is the California director of the National Wildlife Federation, was working with Jeff Sikich, who was the guy that I had to convince at that mountain lion meeting about I need a mountain lion under the Hollywood sign. He started working with me. And then Beth learned that there'd been an idea for a wildlife overpass in Liberty Canyon, about just north of LA on the 101, that had already protected land, state-owned land on one side, federal on the other. So they didn't have to buy it, and it came right up to the freeway. So they could have opportunity to put an overpass there because they were starting to have genetic problems with the cat. Even though the cats weren't trying to move across the 101 that often, they were getting hammered inside the Santa Monica National Recreation Area. And they lost like 5 cats one February, 5 mountain lions and cubs, just in 1 month. There's an area crossing the 405 where they've lost 6, 7, 8 mountain lions in the same exact place, which would be an area that they should put another overpass, but that's going to be a lot of money. But now we're working on trying to help other states realize how important it is to connect these disconnected and habitat and give animals a chance to move under the road or over the road.
Yeah. It will cause a lot of genetic problem, solve a lot of
Yeah.
genetic problems, like you said, and give
Right?
them
Just be
space.
able to bring these cats and the ungulate, bear, chance to move across without the fear of dying.
Yeah, for sure.
We put these roads there. We should give them an option. Yeah. Underpasses are much cheaper. Elk hate underpasses unless they're really big. And you could come by areas like dry riverbeds that are big enough that during the dry season, the elk would go through it. Even if there's some water in there, they still would. If it's big enough, but they like overpasses better.
Hmm. Why is that?
They just don't want to be hemmed in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing good has come out of their situation living with humans. So going under a road where you can hear all the traffic as you're going in it, and you still kind of hear it. The Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Overpass over the 101 that was brought about by the Hollywood Cougar picture partly. When you're in the center of the row of the overpass, You don't hear any traffic.
Wow.
And it's over 10 lanes. And there's 350 to 400,000 cars a day go through that. But it's the design. The design is incredible. It's going to have all these native plants. They have these nurseries that are close by of native plants. So when they have the next edition, it's going to go over the frontage road. Then they'll put all the plants in there.
Hopefully this becomes widespread globally in very
Yeah.
urbanized areas.
Well, it's right now, it's in a lot more places than I imagined there would be. We've done about 13,000 miles driving to different places throughout the United States. But, Canada started this before we did. And there's a bunch of places in Europe. So we'll we'll just keep working on it because it's vitally important that we give them a way to move throughout the area without being stopped by a road. It's like being in prison, with the death sentence being getting out of prison. To get out of prison, you have the option of dying by crossing a road. That should not be.
Definitely. Yeah. Few ending questions. If you could give your 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say start now because I ended up, working for Nick and did the other things, which were good. All that was very important. But I didn't start till later in life. I think when I was 28. So if I had started when I was 20, I didn't go around the world till I was 21. So I was doing important things, the things that were important to development of my personality in my life. But I'd say start early as you can.
100% agree.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
There's no reason not to, is there? You know?
yeah, no reason, and believe in yourself and dream big and realize, follow your dream. It's what I try to tell everybody because I did, whether it scared the shit out of me or not. Look what happened. It scared the shit out of me, which was very important to be super scared. And then have Nick call and say, don't go anywhere. You're going to get a phone call. The woman you're going to see next Wednesday is going to give you an assignment. And you're going to be in National Geographic. So look at what happened. I was scared to death that I wasn't going to make it. And then something else happened, and boom, there I was.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. If Steve Winter is remembered for one thing, what do you want it to be?
If it's only one thing, I would say that we did stories that had meaning and brought about tangible change. And that's from the beginning on that Jaguar one. Try to find a way to stop them getting killed all the way to this one, which is a positive story about the only population left of Asiatic lions that has the population's gone up 32% in the last 5 years. That's 300 more. And so it shows, well, when you have you have what you need, which is the political support, as in the prime minister loves the lines of Gujarat because he's from Gujarat, used to be governor of Gujarat. Um, so they have a lot of support. It's a positive conservation success story, which is not found in many places with predators these days. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But stories that, made a difference.
Yeah. I think they are. They definitely are, Steve. So I don't think you have to worry about being remembered for something else because that's definitely what
Alright.
you're known for now. So hopefully in the
Yeah, but you
future,
know what Sharon and I don't do is blow our own horn. We don't go
yeah,
around and do that. We just do what we do, and hopefully somehow you learn about it or other people do too.
yeah, 100%. Steve Winter, ladies and gentlemen, Steve, really appreciate your time, your work, your photos have been a massive inspiration for me and for so many people around the world, and it has saved many big cats' lives and ecosystems as well. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. What are you currently working on? You just said you came back from an assignment.
The assignment, December National Geographic on Asiatic line.
Brilliant. Yeah. And
Yeah,
where
I'm
can
really lucky. Uh, I don't know. I guess lucky is an okay word for it, but I'm really lucky that I've got to realize my dream and do this. And I get to work with my fiance,
soon to be
Karen.
wife?
Right, soon to be wife. It's great that you have the opportunity to work as photographer and writer. And she was a photographer for so many years, so she gives me a lot of great ideas. So I'm really lucky that I got to live my dream for all the. I'm on a podcast screen. Sorry. No, we're just ending it right now. But thank you so much for inviting me and for putting up with all the back and forth emails
No worries. No worries. It's
because
all
we got a
good.
crazy life. So
Of course. Yeah, no, that's why I appreciate it more than anything. The fact that you've just come back and found some time to come onto the show. And I'll leave the links to all your work in the description, including the foundation. And yeah, thank you very much, Steve. It's great to meet you.
sorry I have all this crap behind my head. It's been bothering me the whole time.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I normally don't have like this in the background. I'm normally in a studio, but it's summer, so it closes early, so I've had to do it in my room as well, so don't worry
Yeah.
about that. Yeah. It's cool, you've
Great.
got cool stuff in your on your wall anyway. It looks like some
Well,
exotic
yeah, and
sea strings.
I got a machine there. Keep going.
We're fitness
Yeah,
on this podcast as well, so it's
exactly.
fitting. It's fitting. Thank you very
So
much, Steve.
much.
Thank you.
Great.
If you want to start your own podcast but have no idea where to start, and you want to generate viral social media clips and get your dream guests onto your show, even from just using your laptop in your bedroom like I did, then my Pro Remote Podcast Blueprint is exactly for you. It is a private paid course and community that has every single step and process I've used and continue to use to grow this show. And I include every single secret, every single tactic I do and still use that will get you results super fast. And also, if you want to access me personally every single week, then as part of this course, you'll also be able to join live weekly calls where I go through your podcast and answer your questions to get you results much, much faster. So if you want to actually start a podcast and stop dreaming and get millions of social media views and book your dream guests in half the amount of time it took me, then click the first link in the description